following preview was begrudgingly approved for all audiences.
You're listening to Elevator Music.
Welcome back to Forward Thinking, presented by the Professional Collegiate League. I'm Ricky Vellante, and I'll be joined by my co-host David West shortly. As usual, we'll be welcoming guests, challenging the status quo, doing social good, and bringing about positive change to the world, while also talking a little bit of sports. In this episode, we're joined by Joel Anderson, staff writer at Slate and host of Slow Burn Season 3. He also previously had stops at BuzzFeed News, ESPN's The Undefeated, and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, amongst others. We're going to take a bit of a deep dive into the current state of college athletics, the escalating levels of exploitation in college sports, the lack of diversity, inclusion, and representation in the coaching and administrative ranks of college sports, and more. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking on your favorite podcast platform and the PCL YouTube channel. You can also get more information at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. We hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Forward Thinking. I'm Ricky Vellante, joined by my co-host David West. We have another special guest this afternoon, Joel Anderson, staff writer at Slate, host of Season 3 of Slow Burn, formerly of ESPN's Undefeated and BuzzFeed News. Joel, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So we usually like to start off just by having our guests give us a bit about how they got into sports, what brought them into this, and then how they transitioned into the business or media side of it.
Okay, man. Wow, that's tough. Well, I guess I'll have to start all the way at the beginning. My dad was briefly a college football player. I picked up the love of the game from him. And, I think my earliest childhood memories of watching the Houston Oilers and Earl Campbell and watching the Houston Rockets, you know what I'm saying? Like the probably the most ecstatic, the most exhilarating feeling I had as a kid was when the Rockets beat the Lakers in 1986. And I don't know if people remember this play. It's like Ralph Sampson. They throw an inbounds pass. Ralph Sampson tips it up in from like the elbow. Like he's like just back. His back is facing the basket. They tips it in and they beat the Lakers in 5 in 1986, which is crazy. I mean, that was the Showtime Lakers. You know what I'm saying? So that was, the Ralph Sampson, Hakeem Olajuwon team. So anyway, I was just a huge sports head growing up, and I played all the sports. Football, basketball, ran track, a little baseball, some soccer, and so yeah, man, I did all that and ended up playing in high school, and I kind of whittled down. I wasn't good enough to play high school basketball at my school. And D. West probably played against one of the guys that went to my school, Jake Voskuhl, who went to my high school, and he was like the 4th best player on our high school basketball team.
Wow.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to be playing there, but I played football, and I was running back and played well enough to get opportunity to play at TCU in Fort Worth, and I played there for a couple years and realized that I didn't like football like that. and so then what was the old NCAA line? We all gonna go pro in something other than sports, and so I always had a passion for like reading and writing, and I read the sports section of the newspaper every day growing up. Like that was just the way I started my day, and so I knew that I wanted to be a sports writer. I watched guys on TV, and I was like, I could do that. Like, why couldn't I do that? And so really, as soon as I stopped playing, I started working for the school newspaper. And that's, that was kind of the point. I presented myself over to the school newspaper, the TCU Daily Skiffs, in 1998 or 99, I can't remember, and started covering. And that's it, So then my athletic career ended when I was 21 years old.
Wow.
So post-school, I think you were at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution first, or did I miss a stop before that?
Boy, yeah, no, man. I traveled around. So, I worked at the local newspaper, the Fort Worth Star-Telegram, for a couple of years. I got an internship, started there, worked there, part-time through college. And then I got an internship at the Associated Press. And the way the Associated Press worked back then, once you got an internship, if you passed, they gave you a full-time job. And so I was like, that was great. You know what I'm saying? So I got my little $35,000 a year and moved to Dallas and, moved into a $600 a month apartment. And that's where I started my career. And so, I worked I covered sports and mostly did a lot of news and any of the little write-ups you see in the newspaper, that has AP, like that's the kind of stuff. I had like a desk job for the first couple of years and then transitioned. And so then after that, I worked in Shreveport, Louisiana. I worked Shreveport Times. At the AP, I worked in Oklahoma City, then Houston. Then I took a job at Shreveport, Louisiana, covering government. That was my first time like doing something non-sports. And so I covered government, that sort of stuff. And then I went to Tampa, okay? And I was in Tampa for 3 years covering government, courts and crime, all that sort of stuff. Then I went to Atlanta and I was there for a couple of years doing the same kind of stuff. Went back to Tampa to get into sports. Because by that time, I'm like, 30, 31, 32. And I'm just like, I'm broke. My friends have nice houses. I can't keep doing this. So I was just like, this is just not going to work. So I was like, let me go back to Tampa for 1 year, cover sports, and let me see if it works. And if, this is my last shot, I'm saying, to make this work. Otherwise, I'm going to have to go get a grown-up job. I started taking the LSAT, all of that. And I was blessed, man. I got really fortunate. I got a job after that year in Tampa with BuzzFeed, and BuzzFeed was just blowing up then. It was like a brand new thing, and they hired me as their senior sports reporter. And I was there, and it was crazy. I was there for like 6 months, and they folded the sports section. And I was just like, man, this was a mistake. But thank God they kept me. They liked me. And a few months after that, Ferguson happened, and they sent me to Ferguson. And that's really, to the extent that I have a career that I'm proud of and that has been successful and has allowed me a lot of opportunity, it was that, unfortunately. I always just remember that, like, Ferguson is a tragedy, man. And I got my blessing out of a tragedy. From there, man, I was at BuzzFeed, had some opportunities. I took a job at ESPN covering college football for a couple of years. And then I came to Slate. Slate asked me if I wanted to do this Slow Burn podcast on Biggie and Tupac. And I was like, that sounds cool. I would like to do that. That sounds like a really creative way to get into the business and try something else. And so that's how I ended up at Slate. I mean, that I covered, like, that was like 20 years right there. So.
And I know you kind of went over it, and I hate to go back, but I'm always in conversation with a lot of young athletes. And so you had to make a tough decision early. You said you sort of just said to yourself, hey, I'm not, football is not what I want to do. I want to go in a different direction. What was the process, if you remember, that you went through? Because that's an important step for a lot of guys. And it's a bit of valuable information because there are a lot of players who, don't know when to say, hey, I shouldn't be going in this direction. I need to go somewhere else. No,
that's a good question. So I'll tell you one thing that helped for real. So my freshman year, I did pretty well. I redshirted, but I did pretty well. They didn't have a lot of competition at my position. And I was like, maybe next year I might get some run. And who they recruited in my freshman year, they brought in as a running back was LaDainian Tomlinson. And I just remember, I remember being in the weight room and just seeing the way he went about it. And I was like, oh, I don't love it like that. I was like,
I got you. Okay.
And I was just like, I also don't think that I think sometimes people don't think kids have like a realistic understanding of where they sit in the world. Cause I hear a lot of times people like, all we do is teach our kids they can go pro with this or that. And I think kids have a much more realistic viewpoint of like where they stand in relation to other people,
Right.
And I just was like, you know what, man, I'm probably not going to get a lot out of this. And I had gone to TCU. It was like back in the days, you couldn't read nothing on the internet about a college, nothing like that. So I went up there. But one thing we did know is that they had a good journalism school. And so I knew that going in, that was like something I wanted to get into someday. Like my idols were like Warren Moon and Ralph Wiley. And I was like, if I can't be Warren Moon, I can cover a Super Bowl. I could be Ralph Wiley. And so I always wrote, it was always something in my mind. It was, my parents probably thought I did not apply myself academically because I put so much energy into my athletic career. Right. I mean, I did work hard. I mean, and I liked the locker room. I mean, that's like the part of it you miss, man. The competition, talking noise with your boys.
Right.
All that stuff, man. Right. And so when I was done, I'll never forget after that first year, man, after I stopped playing football, I just couldn't walk past a football field, or
Wow.
I'd smell like a freshly cut football field, like the grass, and it would just like make me emotional. You know what I mean? But it just took me some time, and it took me a long time before I figured out another identity for myself, because I was just like, I always thought of myself as like, I'm a jock. I'm a smart jock, you know what I'm saying? But I was like, I'm an athlete, and it just took me a long time to just come up with another identity for myself and to think of myself in another way. And so I know that that's tough for athletes. Yes, that's real, man. And I wasn't nowhere near as successful as a lot of guys you talking about. You know what I'm saying? So I can only imagine. But yeah, man, it was difficult. But I was really fortunate that I had something else that I loved, that I knew that I could do well. So.
Right. And you didn't try to, lie to yourself, because that's when, what if you stay and you get injured one of
Yeah.
those practices or something, you never know. But I'm always curious about that.
Oh no, that's what I'll tell you. A brief aside. My mother, so I'm always just like, man, I ain't even make enough money to buy you a house. And she's like, "But baby, you would have been a vegetable if you had kept playing football." So I was like, "All right, well, I was better than that, but whatever." But yeah, so you're right.
And so shifting over to some of the stuff that you've covered, and in particular college sports, I'm going to ask a leading question before we really get into what you've done. Did
Okay.
you ever hold any sort of ill will towards LT, knowing how good he was and that he was getting the minutes?
No, you know why, man? Because first of all, LT is just a really good dude. Like I just like him. He was just a really likable person, and you could not resent him. And also, man, like LT had like a much more difficult. I had like a fairly middle class upbringing. You know what I'm saying? Like LT had it much more difficult than me, man. And I was just like, how could I begrudge a dude who's this good,
Mm.
who's a good dude, works this hard? Like I never held it against him. Like in my athlete brain, I was like, well, I could go somewhere else. I thought about transferring a few other places. And I was like, maybe I. There was a dude who was like an All American running back at Southwest Texas State, and that's where my best friend went. And he was trying to get me to go down there, and I was like, I could probably do that. You know what I'm saying? I could probably go down there and get 1,000 yards in Division One AA. At the end of the day, I was like, man, at the end of the day, it's just not.
You moving, you right.
Yeah, I don't. That's hard. I'm already through college, bro. You know what I'm saying? And so yeah, man. So I never held it against LT, and in fact, yeah, man. No, I learned a lot about like what it's like to be blessed with athleticism and drive. You know what I mean? Like that, it was great. It was great to have a front row seat to see that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so you cover college football now post career. With the Undefeated, you covered a lot of sort of the intersectionality of race and sport, and you lived the college football life at a major D1 school. What's your take on the current state of college athletics and how college athletes are treated broadly before we even get into the fact that we're in a pandemic?
Right, right. I mean, I do think that they are treated better today. That the institutions are a little bit more cognizant of how they treat athletes today. I mean, when I played, we were just a few years out of the time when they would deny you water at practice. You know what I mean? Like people were that ill-informed that this wasn't a lot of like science or like reasoning behind the way they treated athletes. Like I think the athletes are treated better today, right? Like just in terms of the athletics part of it, just the sport. But the dynamics, I think, are actually probably more unforgivable because there's so much more money now. You know what I mean? And like I would have thought if you had asked me in 1995 or 96 when I went to college, like will they be paying athletes or giving them a little bit of a cut or something? About 2020, I'd have been like, yeah, I mean, that just seems like eventually the public is going to catch up on the fact that this is a job. But that none of that has budged. So yeah, and I mean, I sometimes I look at college athletes, I'm like, man, I would have liked the opportunity to have a nice performance gear. You know what I mean? We didn't have that. They gave us, ratty t-shirts to put under our shoulder pad or whatever. But I think that, like I said, they're treated better, but I still think that like the fact that they're denying them from their rightful cut of their labor is even worse today than it was back then. Because it's all in our face now. You know what I mean? All the money that's being made. I mean, dog, I think my head coach, Pat Sullivan, like maybe he cracked a million. I didn't know he probably didn't make $1 million. He probably did not make $1 million back in 1996. And like no decent FBS coach makes under $1 million now. So anyway, I mean, I don't know if that answered the question, but I think if I was a player today, I would be like, yo, coach, they bought him a house. He has a country club membership. He gets a cut from an apparel company, all that stuff. And like, they just telling me that covering my books and food is enough. It would probably irk me a little bit more today.
What about the lack of representation in terms of black head coaches? Where are you at on that?
Oh man, I mean that's
a debate across all of these sports now. So where are you? Yeah,
it's unforgivable. I mean, again, like it was one of those things that you thought that you would see progress because it's a conversation people have been having since even before I was in college, right? There's like, okay, there's not a lot of black college in college football, but the majority of the players are black, so we probably need to get the numbers up. And we're still having this conversation later. Like the numbers have not budged that much. Right. And even, same with athletic directors, all that sort of stuff. Like you don't see that they've made a lot of moves to increase the representation in these jobs that are life changing. You know what I mean? Like even I think about this all the time, man. And some of these people actually reached out to me, like sports information directors and people that work in sports information departments. Like most of those people are white, man.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Those are good jobs.
Right. Right.
And former players, many of the black largely locked out of those jobs.
Well, part of it is they don't even know they exist.
Yep.
I remember when I got to Indiana, this was with in the NBA, so this was after 8 years already. They were the first organization, the second organization I was with, but they literally explained to us who everybody was sitting at the scores table.
Yeah.
And like, we didn't realize like those were 8, 9, 10, 11 jobs. Like we had no clue.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I made a point to like start telling a lot of, young people that I would encounter, like, yo, y'all know that scorekeeping is a real job and being an NBA statistician is a real job. Like, and it was for particularly young black kids, the only thing they learn is to be participants in the sport. And that's it.
Right. Oh man, there's so many jobs, even in like college athletic departments that like, people eat off of, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
People that in the, that deal with NCAA clearinghouse issues, all that other stuff. Like those are great jobs with benefits that so many black athletes never even get a crack at, man.
Right.
Because they're not told about them and they also don't get opportunities at them. So yeah, man, I'm getting worked up, starting to sweat. Just talking about it because it bothers me.
A couple weeks ago, John Thompson passed, right? And there was a video of him, and I remember watching that special. Like my dad made me watch that special. It was like maybe really early in the 2000s because he was still coaching at Georgetown. He basically says on the stage, he says, look, this is not about hiring like the black coach because he said that's the problem, right? The problem is the only black coaches that get hired are like the guys who are like destined to be the absolute best of the best.
Right.
To be John Thompson, or at the time he mentioned Tubby Smith, right, who was coming off the national championship at Kentucky. He was like, his point was, look, there are 300 other coaches who are just okay, and
right.
Not enough of those okay coaches are black. That was his point, right? So it's not about just picking the very best, absolute cream of the crop black coach. It's like giving the black coach the opportunity to just be mediocre like you do the other 300 coaches in the country. That was when he, I hadn't heard that clip in a very long time, but it really brought back into focus. I think we get hung up on like, well, this coach is really, really good and he deserves an opportunity. No, there are coaches that are just okay that have jobs for 10, 12, 15 years and they're just okay. They never win national championships or NBA championships or whatever. So I think that's the balance.
Yeah.
That I had lost sight of personally.
Little black guy being Will Muschamp. You know what I'm saying? let there be a black Will Muschamp. Something like that. I mean, it should not require that. You should not have to be John Thompson or Nolan Richardson.
Right, to get a job, right? Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then even once you get the job, the expectation that comes along with having that job. the opportunity to mess up that white coaches get versus black coaches once
I mean,
they
Willie
have the job.
Taggart. Willie Taggart at Florida State got no time, bro. That program was depleted. Like, there's not a lot of talent. It's a rebuild job. And they ran him out of there while he was in the middle of a rebuild. He got a year and a half. That's just not something that is going to happen to the guy that succeeded him there. That this is not. He's going to get his opportunity to fail.
Right. Yeah. It's and going back to your athletic director or athletic department point, most of those people now have associate athletic director titles. And by the last time that the stats were done, at least that I've checked them out, associate athletic directors were 84% white, and assistant athletic directors, which is the next level down, are 86 to 87% white.
Yeah, man, that's just unforgivable. Like, think about all the guys you bring through your program, and you tell them you're going to take care of them, and then as soon as they're done, you forget about them. You don't bring them back. You bring them in like ceremonial roles. You know what I'm saying? You don't give them a chance to build a career.
Right.
So yeah, it's like I said, it's probably worse now. Like I said, being an athlete, being taken care of, the food, the diet, all that stuff, great. I go back to TCU. I'm like, man, I would have loved to have had the facility. But yeah, nah, man, they didn't. They don't look out. A lot of those guys, they don't look out for them when it's all over.
That also leads us into the power dynamics that exist, and I have a feeling that what we've just discussed is one of the reasons why it is the way that it is in terms of representation within the administration and coaching staffs. But so we have two sports in particular, basketball and football, that are generating 90% of the revenue across the board for college athletics, which now has eclipsed $14 billion annually when you factor everything in.
Cool. You
have 60% of the athletes in these two primary sports are black, yet the coaching staffs are, depending on the sport, either 78% white or 82 or 83% white in football. And so is that part of the reason why we haven't seen much progress in terms of representation for these athletes and the continuation of, for lack of a better term, indentured servitude in college sports?
Well, I mean, there's a strong incentive to keep, that money within, a cloistered group of people, right? I mean, I just think about, this isn't college, but like Bill Belichick's son already being touted as a head coaching candidate. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a pool, these guys, and I'm not going to say it's outright racism, but it is a function of racism that like these people have when they're making recommendations and they've got their pool of candidates and they're all dealing in the same little circles, right? Am I truly supposed to believe, and Kyle Shanahan is a very good coach, but am I truly supposed to believe that he got in through anything other than nepotism? The way that they found out that he was great is that he got an opportunity, but that just doesn't happen for so many other people. So there's a strong incentive to like hit your boy off with these jobs. Or I know somebody, that guy that Urban Meyer hired, he's a tire fire, Zach Smith, the guy that, ran in all that trouble at Ohio State, right?
Right.
I mean, Urban Meyer hired him as a favor to somebody else. And like that's so much of that is how hiring happens in colleges and professional sports. And so, yeah, man, I mean, it's just, the thing is that people have to look outside of their circles to diversify, and there's just not a lot of incentive for people to do that. There's nothing making people do it, and so if you don't force them to do it, they're probably not going to do it. Most people hire the people they know, or the people they're comfortable with, or the people that are recommended to them. They don't want to do the hard work of looking and like actually giving people chances that have not traditionally gotten chances. I mean, man, it's just, I think, and I've made this point before real quick, is that, so when I was at TCU, we had 3 black assistants on the staff, okay? 3 black coaches, 3 black assistants on TCU's team. This is 1996. Mm-hmm. I look back just a few months ago, all of them are running backs coaches today. You know what I mean? Like, that's crazy. You know what I mean? What are the odds that they couldn't have advanced and gotten a head coaching job by now? None of them have ever been a head coach. Only one of them has had a year as a coordinator in college football. So, yeah, man.
Wow.
All right. And so now shifting to the player piece of this too. So we're in a pandemic, for those that haven't already noticed, and college football has begun.
Yeah.
And the athletes now going to more representation in the legal sense have had no opportunity to bargain or in any way represent their interests in the context of this conversation. In terms of everything else that's going on politically, socially, again, I go back to this is a system as close to indentured servitude as this country has seen. So how do you foresee any of this changing if it changes? I know we had some player movements at the beginning of the middle of the summer now, which have all fizzled out without much fanfare. Legislatively, Congress is talking about it. Marco Rubio's put out a proposed bill. Anthony Gonzalez, former Ohio State receivers, put out a bipartisan bill. You have us, the PCL, who are trying to competitively change things. So how do you see this playing out over the next, if we give you a crystal ball, 5 to 10 years, and does it get any better for the athletes?
I mean, the thing is that the movement is going to have to come from somebody outside of the athletes, like you guys, like your league, right? Because the athletes, there's churn. They're there for a very short amount of time, and they are like inundated with obligations. You know what I mean? Like they don't have a lot of time to be activists because in addition to doing their sport, they've got to stay eligible. They're also college students. I mean, they're 18, 22, 23 years old. I mean, like maybe I just want to sit down and play Madden or holler at some girls or whatever. You know what I mean? So it's going to require people from the outside who have an interest in this and know that the dynamics are wrong and push the NCAA and all these conferences to change the arrangement with these players. And like that's what I like about what you guys are doing with the Professional Collegiate League, what the G League is doing, all these sort of things are to sort of, shaking, just making the NCAA and college institutions have to adjust. You know what I'm saying? Because just forcing them to change the dynamic and the relationships with their labor force. Because, yeah, I mean, have y'all heard anything about We Are United in the last month or so? I mean, I hadn't heard nothing about it.
Right. It's certainly fizzled out. It seems like testing was one of the critical pieces. But also, I will say, and we had Bucky McGill from the Syracuse 8 join us now a couple months ago. The point that he made in terms of looking forward for those athletes was that each of them had to be willing to sit games out.
Right.
And possibly end their football career. And if they didn't have that dedication to it, which is ultimately what happened to him and some of the other members of the Syracuse 8, if they weren't willing to do that, then his hope for success was not particularly high. And between the Big Ten, especially at Ohio State, that open letter from the unnamed football players, it was Ohio State athletes. It wasn't just football players that came out. I mean, it's certainly, like I said, it's sort of fizzled out without much fanfare.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, we're asking the players to pay a really high price. First of all, of course they want to play. Like, I mean, why? I mean, nobody wants to give up. And D West, I mean, you only get so many games in your life, especially in college, being with your brothers. In college football, it's even, you get, 11, 12 weeks, maybe more if you're fortunate, and you only get so much time. So, like, of course they want to play, but asking them to sit out is asking them a lot. And it's asking them to do something that not a lot of the people would do in the same position. Also, and I think back to the new head coach at Washington State, Nick Rolovich, when they caught him on tape, basically threatening kids if they wanted to sit out or boycott anything. And actually, just yesterday, one of the kids who exposed that, I saw that he entered the transfer portal yesterday, Cassidy Woods. So, yeah, man, there's a lot of factors that put the players in this really vulnerable position, and it's not fair to ask them to give up something that not a lot of us would. But it is true that either they're going to have to sit out and be willing to pay the cost, which might be losing their scholarships, being pariahs on campus, because people get mad at them and call them entitled and all this other stuff when they want to fight for their rights. So, yeah, man, I think the thing is, like, once they got them playing again, once they got them back, I just knew that it was a lot of the player movement would be over for this year, and we just have to keep pressing in the off season, and hopefully you guys, press them on it and make athletes an opportunity to try something else. People that are against the relationship that the NCAA has with its athletes have a really compelling case this year because they see that there's all this money in their face. Now we know that the whole system depends on those boys being out there in a pandemic, right? We know it. And so if they're not going to pay them or try to come up with more fair arrangements to compensate these players this year, there's probably not going to happen. They're not going to do it on their own. So it's going to require some intervention from somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's to your point, and I've always been critical of those that have said a wildcat strike to just walk out during right before a game tips off, whether it's basketball or football. It's unfair to ask that of the athletes.
I thought it was unfair to ask it of the NBA players. You know what I mean? Like I was just like, yo, like they want to play too. You know what I'm saying? Basketball is like, of course they love playing the sport, and we're asking them to do something and to correct a system that is not their fault. And so, like, yeah, I mean, I just don't. I mean, I would have liked the players to continue the strike. I would have liked them to deny people the right to watch basketball during this time of turmoil and so and to put it in their face. You know what I'm saying? People that don't want to hear about racial and social justice, but I understand why they did. So yeah, I understand why the players wanted to ultimately get back and play. And the reasons they needed to play. I mean, it wasn't just that they wanted to play; they also need to play, right? I mean, there's the CBA and all this other stuff, right? And so NBA players have so much more influence and power in their relationship with the league governors and all that other stuff. And the college players have none.
Yeah, and especially once word leaked that several NFL teams were going to put more emphasis into scouting players that decided to play rather than walked away or decided to opt out. Once that happened, then there was a bunch of players that started walking back their opt-outs because, at that point, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just tough, man. I
mean, NFL was
yeah, exactly. The NFL complicit in racial and social injustices. Who would ever imagine such a thing?
Imagine that. I mean, Eric Reid sitting at home, bro.
Right.
Eric Reid sitting at home. He should be playing right now. You know, people can talk about Cap, whatever. Fine, it's been too long. You say he's not good enough, which we know is bullshit, but whatever. Eric Reid, right here, one of the best safeties in the league last year, not in the league right now. So
beyond that, think about how many safeties and corners are out for the year with injuries over the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, man. I mean, people will punish you if you stand up for your rights. You know what I mean?
Right.
Exactly. And that's been proven time and time again. But now going back, looping around to my earlier leading question, one of the biggest criticisms of the idea of compensating college athletes is that they would not be able to handle some members of the team getting paid differently than others. And that because of that, there's simply no way to make it work. What's your take on not only the mental perspective of the athletes, having some getting paid more than others, but also just in terms of putting a system in place that would have people getting paid more than others?
Well, fundamentally, that's just stupid. I mean, first of all, players already know that there's differences amongst themselves. You know what I mean? Like they know the different. They know who that dude is on the team, and they know where they rank for the most part. Also, you don't hear coaches talking about that. You know what I mean? Like some assistant coaches make more than other assistant coaches. We don't think that there's going to be some sort of turmoil because the offensive coordinator makes $1 million and the co-head coach special teams coordinator makes $750,000. Like nobody, because that's absurd. Like everybody knows the deal is the deal you make. You know what I'm saying? So I just I've never bought that. They can figure out a way to make it work, and we don't. Again, when they're talking about levying the playing field, they never talk about, all right, well, let's make sure that all the coaches and athletic administrators make the same amount of money because we don't want anybody to get uncomfortable about that. That's really, we don't want that to cause dissension within our institution. Nobody does that. Why do they think the players are so different? They know what the deal is, man. They can handle it.
And actually, there was a lawsuit. For those that don't know this, they did try to cap GA and lower assistant coach compensation in the mid-2000s, and it was deemed an antitrust violation.
Really? Oh, see, yeah. When I was coming up, man, they paid GAs in grits and tattered clothes, bro. It was like they were making like $16,000 a year. You know what I mean? It was really bad, them guys. So yeah, man. The money is there. They can pay the players. The players will figure it out. They understand. Players are people for one, and they have a much more sophisticated understanding of their role in the sports ecosystem than people think they do. They understand. Hey, James Wiseman is 5-star, number 1 ranked recruit in the country. I'm number 324 recruit. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not. Yeah, I'm not as desired. You know, some athletes have more options about schools they want to go to, better options. Some guys can go to Kentucky, UCLA, Florida, whatever, and some people might got to go to Austin Peay. I mean, so I just,
Are you
yeah,
right?
yeah. I mean, I think that's just BS, man.
Yeah,
It's
players,
just another way to confuse people.
right, and players understand. I mean, that's a part of playing the sport. Like, you know who the starter is. You know you're not. You know, you're a bench player. You're a reserve. You're the 11th scholarship guy out of 12 scholarships. So, and it's always funny to me how they always know, right? They always represent what the players will do or what they might say or how they may feel without actually having the players represented. Like, they always
Right,
do that. Like,
right. They not the players ain't at the table. They ain't asking, but yeah,
right,
Divas, you know, I mean, ain't the 11th guy on the team ain't gonna be like, well, it's not fair, man. Y'all playing, the dude who averages 20 points a game, 38 minutes a night. It's
right,
not fair. I should be playing, at least 25. We should split. Like, that doesn't happen.
right.
So they'll get it. They'll understand.
Yeah, absolutely. The last thing I'll ask you in terms of the return to college athletics, and unfortunately was brought up in last night's debate, it's become a political issue, whether we want it to be or not. What's
I
your
brought
take
football
on
back. See,
to what?
football again. I brought football back to Ohio.
Oh no, right. I was like, man, of course.
Well, I mean, he was in Cleveland. Unfortunately, we had don't take offense to this, Dave. We had a lot of garbage from New York and Cleveland last night.
I got you.
But a lot of people have had this shifting, target in terms of people are being critical that college athletes are back because it's unsafe. But in reality, I don't think a whole lot of people are saying that college athletics shouldn't be playing in the pandemic. We're just saying that if you're going to, they need to have a seat at the table. What worked with the NBA is that the unions had a chance to negotiate. So in terms of having a representative unit for athletes, which I know that college athletics, you already talked about, there's so much turnover that it does have unique challenges. But that said, how critical is it going forward to have some sort of representative unit representing the interests of athletes in the context of college athletics?
Oh, I mean, it's deadly serious. I mean, literally, it's deadly serious that athletes have somebody to. I was reading a story about the NHL bubble, and they were talking about at the end, the players were like, man, they lied to us about a lot of the accommodations and the amenities here and things that they said they were going to deliver, they did not, and all that. Those are professional athletes with a bargaining unit. Just imagine how they're treating college athletes, man, about the things that they're saying they're going to do for them and don't do in terms of taking care of them. And I just read a story today. Missouri's football coach, I think Eli Drinkwitz, said that there's no uniform SEC policy for reporting test results, right?
Yes,
And
he did say that.
and no protocol for sharing that information. You know what I mean? So, I mean, they are really rolling the dice with these boys. And they're just taking the chance that, they'll be able to get through it. Nothing will be happening. Maybe they'll have to sit out or whatever. Meanwhile, we've had at least one college football player die this year because of COVID. He's got California, Pennsylvania.
Big kid, yeah.
Yeah. Jermaine Stevens. Jermaine Stevens' son. I think his name is Jermaine Stevens Jr. And they're willing to roll the dice with these kids in a way that I find like deplorable, man. It's just it's really scary. And, it's unconscionable that they're making all these decisions about the health of these players without them at the table, that there's not some sort of bargaining. They're going to have to fight for it, or somebody's going to have to fight for it because you can see that they just don't care. I mean, for Coach Orgeron to sit up here and say, I think all my players got sick. You don't think that is a failure, bro? You don't think that's a failure of your system? Like, I mean, you're bragging about it? Come on. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's just hard. If I was a parent of a recruit, that is if you were a coach and you came to my house, that'd be a question I have for you, man. I was like, why did you play? What are you going to do to ensure that my son doesn't get sick here? Like, why did you play? And I'd ask him all sorts of other questions too, like, what do you think about Black Lives Matter? All that kind of stuff.
Right.
We have another Dabo quote.
Yeah, I was gonna say my boy couldn't play for Dabo. I'm sorry,
It's a very dangerous situation because how college coaches are. If they're the first ones to get the information, and it's like this kid is not showing any symptoms, he's not showing, he's asymptomatic, whatever it is. he's going to be out there playing football.
Yeah.
You know, I forgot which one of these folks or these individuals said it early on. Like, you know, our guys are young, fast,
Gundy.
strong. Yeah, Gundy.
Yeah.
Gundy.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So again, you know where their mindset is. So I just my thing is that the players get, you know, have some representation. The players can actually, you know, voice their concerns. But particularly in football, you know, these coaches just don't give a damn. They're going to get those guys out there on the field. I saw what Saban did down there on Alabama's campus. He's walking around campus.
Oh yeah. That's easy. They didn't ask him to do nothing. That's not really asking him to do nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And just to add, this isn't something that is unique to the pandemic. I mean, obviously the pandemic has really put it on full display. But since 2000, we've had 37 football players die. With the bulk of them, I think only 4 of them were as a result of a contact injury. The rest of them have been training-related deaths. Yeah. And in that same period of time, we have only had 1 death in the NFL, and that was Corey Stringer. And that was, you know, that was sort of a freak accident, just given the diuretic that he was taking, and the team didn't know, and, you know, sort of a imperfect storm of events that led to his death. But because you don't have a unit determining your working conditions, we have football coaches killing players.
Oh yeah, I mean Jordan McNair, man. They tried to hire man, I can't remember, DJ Durkin. Somebody tried to hire. They tried to
Alabama.
hire him. Yeah, right. And I'm just like, dog, we just you don't even have enough shame to take some time on this for real. Like at least give him at least put a couple years in distance between that and give him a chance to show some actual remorse for what happened there. You know what I'm saying? But they have no shame, man. The incentives for college coaches to look out for themselves and their careers only are way too high, man.
Right. I agree. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. Yeah. I got one question I always like to end with, man. It's just what is your morning routine? You know, I think over the course of my life, man, I've found that people who are successful, people who have impact, they have morning routines or something that they do specifically, you know, at the start of every day. What is that for you?
Yeah, that's real. So I'm getting old now. I'm 42. You know what I'm saying? So I get up, I go to bed early. So I'm in bed by like 9:30 every night.
Right.
And I get up at about 5:30, and I make myself breakfast, man. I make myself usually it's a bowl of oatmeal and a small omelet, and that takes me about 20 minutes, and I go get my workout in. I have a little rowing machine and a kettlebell, a dumbbell, and I get my little workout. And before the pandemic, I used to go to my gym. I have a CrossFit gym right up the street from me, so I would get my workout in, man. My old man, you know, he always would say, you know, son, if you ain't got your health, you ain't got nothing.
Right.
And so, like, that was always, you know, sort of instilled in me. So that's really how I start my morning. I do that every morning, same breakfast, go through my little workout, you know, get my shower, and then, you know, maybe I'm sitting in front of my computer by 8:39, and, you know, I try to return all my emails, you know what I'm saying, so I don't get too far behind. And then I start, you know, making my calls. But yeah, no, that's kind of the way that I get through every morning, you know. I got to get my sweat in. I don't know about y'all, but if I don't get my workout in the morning, then it's just going to be hard, you know.
Right.
Yeah. You know, like, I mean, if like I'm looking at 5 p.m. and I hadn't worked out, I'm like, man, something on TV, that's about to be a game. I'm already tired, you know, whatever. So yeah, man, that's how I do it.
Well, we appreciate the time, appreciate the conversation, dope conversation, man. We appreciate it.
No, bro, real quick, I want to tell you. So I covered your last game your junior year. Where did you play you played in Reunion Arena, didn't you, in Dallas? This is even before the AAC.
Oh yeah, we lost Oklahoma. Yeah,
the Hollis Price, right?
Yeah, lost to Hollis and Ebby. Yeah, Ebby and Rob. That team, yeah.
I covered that game, and what I remember from it the most is that so this is 2002, and this is before the internet. You could get all the information you want. And Kelvin Sampson I'd not even seen Xavier play at that point. I was like, oh, okay, they here, whatever. I'd not heard of them. And I'm from Texas. It's just, we're very regional.
Right.
And Kelvin Sampson's like, David West, when he comes out and plays, he's better than 90% of the players every night he plays against. I was like, I never heard it. I just heard it. But you went out involved. So anyway, I remember.
Yeah, they were loaded, man. They were loaded that year.
They didn't score a lot. They wouldn't no high scoring team or nothing though. You know what I'm saying?
They were tough, man. They were tough. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate you, Joel.
No, man, my pleasure.
Been a great
thanks for having me on. I
conversation.
love what y'all do, man. So thanks for having me on. It was my pleasure, for real.
Absolutely, man. Be well.
Thank you,
All right, man. Y'all take it easy now.
Yes, sir.
You too.
All right, peace.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Forward Thinking, presented by the PCL. This show is co-hosted by David West and Ricky Vellante, produced by Wendell Haskins, Rafa Hernandez Brito, and Ricky Vellante, and the music is done by David West. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking on your favorite podcast platform and the PCL YouTube channel. You can also get more information at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. We'll be back with another episode next week. In the meantime, stay safe.